Patrick sat in the dimly lit living room, pretending to read a book. Andrea had just left for another girls' night out. Her perfume lingered in the air, a scent he had grown to detest. This was the fourth time in a week she had gone out, and his suspicions grew with each outing. Patrick decided to take action. The next day, he visited a private investigator's office downtown. The investigator, Mr. Harris, had a reputation for thoroughness. Patrick handed over a photo of Andrea and a detailed account of her recent behavior. Harris assured him that he'd get to the bottom of it. A week later, Patrick received a thick envelope from Harris. He opened it to find a series of photographs and a detailed report. The photos showed Andrea laughing and dancing with a muscular man at a popular nightclub, the Sapphire Lounge. Other pictures depicted them in intimate embraces and leaving the club together. Patrick felt a surge of adrenaline. He examined the report further. Andrea had met the man, identified as Michael, several months ago at the nightclub. They had been meeting regularly, often staying out until the early hours of the morning. He knew he needed more evidence. He decided to follow Andrea himself the next time she went out. On Friday night, she left the house at 9 p.m., dressed in a red dress that Patrick hadn't seen before. He waited a few minutes before getting into his car and driving to the Sapphire Lounge. From a distance, Patrick watched Andrea enter the club. He parked his car in a nearby lot and walked over. Peering through the club's windows, he saw her with Michael again. They were seated at a corner table, heads close together. Patrick's heart raced as he snapped a few photos with his phone. He decided to enter the club, blending into the crowd. He ordered a drink and found a spot at the bar where he could observe them unnoticed. Andrea and Michael were completely engrossed in each other, oblivious to Patrick's presence. After an hour, they got up and left the club. Patrick followed them discreetly to a nearby motel, where they checked in. He took more photos before heading back to his car. The evidence was undeniable. Andrea was having an affair. Driving home, Patrick reflected on the changes he had noticed over the past few months. Andrea had been distant, often avoiding eye contact and coming up with flimsy excuses for her absences. He had given her the benefit of the doubt, but now the truth was staring him in the face. Back at home, Patrick gathered all the evidence and stored it in a locked drawer. He needed time to plan his next move. He wasn't going to confront Andrea immediately. He wanted to be prepared. His mind raced with thoughts of betrayal and revenge, but he knew he had to stay calm and think clearly. As he lay in bed that night, Patrick listened to the ticking of the clock. Andrea hadn't returned yet. He wondered how long she would keep up this charade and how much longer he could pretend not to know. Tomorrow, he would meet with Harris again and discuss the next steps. For now, he closed his eyes, determined to stay one step ahead. Patrick started his day early, heading to his office downtown. Before diving into his usual tasks, he opened his computer and initiated a series of financial transactions. He transferred substantial amounts of money from his joint accounts with Andrea to a new, secret account he had opened in his name only. At lunch, Patrick met with his financial advisor at the corner bistro. Over a salad and iced tea, they discussed the need to safeguard his assets. The advisor suggested diversifying his investments and moving a significant portion to offshore accounts. Patrick agreed and made a mental note to execute these changes later that week. Back at his desk, Patrick drafted a new will. He meticulously detailed the distribution of his assets, ensuring that Andrea would be left with as little as possible. He included clauses to protect his business and personal properties. Once finished, he contacted his lawyer to schedule a meeting for finalizing the document. In the evening, Patrick returned home and discreetly gathered all financial documents he could find. He retrieved bank statements, property deeds, and investment portfolios from their filing cabinet. After making copies of everything, he secured the originals in a lockbox hidden in the basement. The next day, Patrick visited the local branch of his bank to discuss additional security measures. He arranged for heightened monitoring of his accounts and set up alerts for any large transactions. The banker, a trusted friend, assured him that his assets would be closely guarded. Over the weekend, Patrick made a trip to his family's cabin in the mountains. He used the secluded location to store some of the documents and valuables. It was a place Andrea never visited, making it an ideal hiding spot. He also stashed some cash in a safe hidden under the floorboards. On Monday, Patrick met with his lawyer to finalize the updated will. They reviewed each section, ensuring everything was in order. The lawyer, an experienced professional, notarized the document and stored a copy in his office. Patrick left feeling more secure about his preparations. That afternoon, Patrick received a call from his insurance agent. They discussed updating his life insurance policy to reflect the changes in his will. He increased the coverage amount and changed the beneficiary to his sister, further securing his family's future. Throughout the week, Patrick continued to monitor his finances closely. He used his lunch breaks to visit various financial institutions, setting up additional safeguards. He also began liquidating some non-essential assets, converting them to cash or safer investments. One evening, Patrick invited a few close friends over for dinner. As they enjoyed steaks and wine, he casually inquired about their experiences with divorce and financial protection. Their insights proved valuable, offering him additional strategies to consider. By the end of the month, Patrick had fully fortified his financial position. He felt confident that he had taken all necessary precautions. He continued to act normally around Andrea, hiding his knowledge and intentions. Every move he made was calculated, each step bringing him closer to being prepared for the inevitable confrontation. As Patrick sat in his study, he reviewed the final checklist of his preparations. Everything was in place. He knew that when the time came, he would be ready to face Andrea with undeniable evidence and unassailable financial security. Patrick arrived at the Sapphire Lounge around 10 p.m., parking his car a block away to avoid being noticed. The club's neon lights flickered, casting a colorful glow on the street. He walked briskly to the entrance, where the bouncer gave him a once-over before allowing him inside. The music was loud, and the dance floor was packed with people. Patrick scanned the room and quickly spotted Andrea and Michael at a corner table, deep in conversation. He moved closer, weaving through the crowd, until he was within earshot. "Mind if I join you?" Patrick said, pulling up a chair without waiting for a response. Andrea's eyes widened in shock, but Michael just smirked. "This is a private conversation," Michael said, leaning back in his chair. "Why don't you run along?" "Not until we clear some things up," Patrick replied, leaning forward. "I know everything about your little rendezvous." Michael's smirk disappeared. "Is that so? What are you going to do about it?" Patrick placed a stack of photos on the table. "These say it all. I could ruin both your lives with these." Michael glanced at the photos and then back at Patrick. "You think you can intimidate me with a few pictures? You're out of your league, old man." The tension at the table was palpable. Andrea looked between the two men, her face pale. Patrick stood his ground, refusing to be intimidated. "I've got more than photos," Patrick said, his voice steady. "I've got financial records, phone logs, everything. You're messing with the wrong person." Michael leaned in, his face inches from Patrick's. "You don't scare me. In fact, I think it's time you left." Without warning, Michael stood up and grabbed Patrick by the collar. The sudden movement caught the attention of nearby patrons, who began to watch the unfolding drama. "Let go," Patrick said calmly, not raising his voice. "You're making a scene." Michael tightened his grip. "You think you can come in here and threaten me? Think again." A bouncer approached, ready to intervene. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" Patrick shook free from Michael's grasp. "No problem. We were just leaving." He turned and walked toward the exit, knowing Michael would follow. Outside, the cool night air was a stark contrast to the club's heat. Michael shoved Patrick against a parked car, fists clenched. "You're gonna regret this," Michael growled. "Stay out of my way." Patrick straightened his jacket, unfazed. "You should be the one worried. I've got enough to put you away for a long time." Michael hesitated, then backed off. "This isn't over." Patrick watched as Michael disappeared back into the club. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the encounter. His resolve to exact revenge had only grown stronger. As Patrick walked back to his car, he replayed the confrontation in his mind. He knew Michael wouldn't back down easily, but he was prepared for whatever came next. Patrick had the evidence and the determination to see this through. The drive home was quiet, the streets nearly empty. Patrick parked in the driveway and entered the house, careful not to wake Andrea. He went straight to his study, where he reviewed the evidence once more, ensuring everything was in order. Patrick knew the confrontation had been a necessary step. He had shown Michael that he wasn't afraid and that he was ready to fight for what was his. The night had only solidified his plans for the future, leaving him more determined than ever to see his revenge through to the end. Andrea's health started to deteriorate gradually. At first, she dismissed the fatigue and occasional fevers as minor issues. She continued her usual routine, going to the gym in the mornings, meeting friends for lunch at the local cafe, and maintaining her evening outings. However, she secretly started visiting the pharmacy more often, buying over-the-counter medications to manage her symptoms. One afternoon, Andrea canceled her lunch plans and instead visited Dr. Roberts, a physician she had seen occasionally. She complained of persistent headaches and unusual rashes. Dr. Roberts ran some tests and asked Andrea to wait for the results, advising her to rest and avoid strenuous activities. Despite the doctor's advice, Andrea continued her late-night outings. Patrick noticed she was more tired than usual and often took long naps during the day. One evening, while Patrick was in his study, he heard Andrea coughing violently in the bathroom. He knocked on the door, but she insisted she was fine, blaming it on a minor cold. Andrea's condition worsened. She began losing weight rapidly and had difficulty keeping up with her daily activities. One night, after a particularly exhausting day, she decided to skip her usual nightclub visit. Instead, she stayed home, attempting to relax on the couch with a glass of wine and a book. Around midnight, Patrick heard a loud thud from the living room. He rushed downstairs to find Andrea unconscious on the floor. Panicking, he called 911, and an ambulance arrived within minutes. Paramedics stabilized Andrea and rushed her to the nearest hospital. In the emergency room, doctors ran a series of tests. Patrick paced the hallway, waiting for news. After what felt like hours, Dr. Lee, the attending physician, approached Patrick with a grim expression. Andrea had been diagnosed with a terminal STD, which had severely compromised her immune system. Andrea was moved to the intensive care unit and placed in a medically induced coma to stabilize her condition. Patrick sat by her bedside, watching the monitors beep rhythmically. The room was filled with the sterile scent of antiseptic, and the soft hum of machines provided a constant background noise. Days turned into weeks. Patrick continued his daily routine, visiting Andrea at the hospital each evening after work. He brought her favorite flowers, rearranged her room, and ensured she had a comfortable environment, even though she remained unresponsive. During this time, Patrick met with Dr. Lee several times to discuss Andrea's prognosis. The doctor explained the severity of her condition and the limited treatment options available. Patrick nodded, absorbing the information, and thanked Dr. Lee for his honesty. At home, Patrick maintained a semblance of normalcy. He attended to household chores, prepared simple meals, and kept in touch with friends and family. He visited the grocery store, picked up dry cleaning, and made regular trips to the pharmacy to refill his own medications. Andrea's decline became a topic of conversation among their social circle. Friends sent messages of support, and some visited the hospital to offer their condolences. Patrick politely accepted their sympathy, but he remained focused on the reality of the situation. As the months passed, Andrea showed no signs of improvement. Her doctors continued to monitor her condition, but her prognosis remained bleak. Patrick prepared himself for the inevitable, ensuring that all necessary arrangements were in place. He reviewed legal documents, met with financial advisors, and consulted with his lawyer to finalize his plans. Andrea's collapse and subsequent coma marked a turning point. Patrick knew that the confrontation and revelations would come soon enough, but for now, he remained steadfast, taking each day as it came, preparing for the moment when Andrea would awaken to face the consequences of her actions. With Andrea in a coma, Patrick decided to focus on himself. He woke up early every morning and drove to the new gym downtown. The facility was modern, with state-of-the-art equipment and an invigorating atmosphere. Patrick began a rigorous workout routine, starting with a warm-up on the treadmill, followed by weightlifting and ending with a swim in the pristine pool. Patrick noticed changes quickly. His stamina increased, and his muscles became more defined. After a month, he hired a personal trainer named Alex, who tailored his workouts to maximize his progress. Alex introduced Patrick to a high-protein diet, recommending specific foods and supplements. Patrick incorporated grilled chicken, quinoa, and green smoothies into his meals. Eager to update his look, Patrick visited a trendy clothing store, Boutique Fifth Avenue. He consulted with a stylist named Lisa, who helped him pick out a new wardrobe. He left the store with tailored suits, casual blazers, and designer jeans, feeling rejuvenated. Patrick also began frequenting a barber shop called the Gentleman's Den, where he received stylish haircuts and beard trims. His visits became a routine, and the barbers knew him by name. They recommended hair products that added to his polished appearance. With his newfound confidence, Patrick re-entered the dating scene. He signed up for an online dating service, creating a profile that highlighted his interests and new lifestyle. He received numerous messages and went on several dates. His first date was at a wine bar called The Vineyard, where he met Laura, a graphic designer. They talked about art and travel, enjoying the evening. Patrick's friends noticed the transformation. At a weekend barbecue, his friend Steve commented on Patrick's appearance, complimenting his new style. Patrick laughed, thanking Steve and sharing his journey. Their conversation shifted to planning a hiking trip, something Patrick had taken up as part of his active lifestyle. Patrick's weekdays became structured and productive. After morning gym sessions, he went to work at his advertising firm. He focused on securing new clients and brainstorming creative campaigns. His colleagues were impressed with his energy and innovative ideas, leading to several successful projects. In the evenings, Patrick attended cooking classes at a culinary school named Gourmet Delights. He learned to prepare intricate dishes like coq au vin and tiramisu. His classmates were a mix of enthusiasts and professionals, making the sessions lively and educational. Patrick began hosting dinner parties, inviting friends to taste his culinary creations. On weekends, Patrick explored new hobbies. He joined a photography club, spending Saturdays capturing cityscapes and nature shots. The club members critiqued each other's work, providing valuable feedback. Patrick also took up salsa dancing, attending classes at a dance studio called Rhythm and Motion. His dance partner, Elena, was an experienced dancer who helped him improve quickly. Patrick's transformation wasn't limited to physical and social changes. He delved into self-improvement books, reading titles like Atomic Habits and The Power of Now. He practiced mindfulness and meditation, which helped him stay focused and calm. One evening, Patrick attended a charity gala at the Grand Hall, dressed in one of his new suits. The event was a fundraiser for a local children's hospital, and Patrick mingled with other attendees, discussing philanthropy and community projects. His presence at such events became regular, enhancing his social network. By the end of the 6 months, Patrick's transformation was evident to everyone around him. He had become a confident, well-rounded individual with a vibrant social life and a focus on self-improvement. His new lifestyle was fulfilling, and he was ready to face whatever came next, fully prepared for the challenges ahead. Patrick met Janice on a crisp autumn afternoon at a book signing event for a best-selling author. The venue, Page Turner's bookstore, was bustling with readers and enthusiasts. Janice, an avid reader and literature professor, stood in line with a first edition copy, chatting with the author about her work. Intrigued by her intelligence and warm personality, Patrick struck up a conversation after the signing. They discovered a shared love for classic literature and exchanged numbers before parting ways. Their first date was at a quaint cafe named the Beanery. Over cappuccinos and pastries, they discussed their favorite books and films, finding more common interests. Patrick appreciated Janice's kindness and genuine interest in his life. He found her refreshing, a stark contrast to the deceit and drama he'd experienced with Andrea. Patrick and Janice spent weekends exploring local farmers markets and antique shops. They enjoyed cooking together, often trying out new recipes from the classes Patrick had attended. Their evenings were filled with laughter and conversations, building a strong foundation for their relationship. One Saturday, they took a day trip to the coastal town of Newport. They visited the historic mansions and strolled along the cliff walk, taking in the ocean views. Janice's supportive nature shone through as she encouraged Patrick to talk about his past, helping him process his experiences with Andrea. She never judged, always listening with compassion. Patrick introduced Janice to his circle of friends at a dinner party. Steve, his longtime friend, and his wife were among the guests. The evening was filled with good food, wine, and engaging conversations. Janice fit in effortlessly, charming everyone with her wit and warmth. Steve pulled Patrick aside, expressing his approval and happiness for him finding someone so wonderful. As their relationship deepened, Patrick decided it was time to propose. He planned a romantic weekend getaway to a cabin in the mountains, a place where he found solace. They hiked during the day, enjoying the crisp air and scenic trails. In the evenings, they sat by the fireplace, sharing stories and dreams for the future. On the second night, Patrick prepared a special dinner with Janice's favorite dishes. After dessert, he led her outside to the porch, where the stars shone brightly in the clear night sky. Taking her hand, he knelt and presented a ring, asking Janice to marry him. Her eyes lit up with joy as she accepted, and they embraced, excited for their future together. Back in the city, Patrick and Janice began planning their wedding. They chose a charming vineyard as the venue, with its picturesque landscape and intimate setting. They spent weekends meeting with vendors, tasting cakes, and selecting flowers. The preparations brought them closer, solidifying their bond. Patrick's colleagues at the advertising firm noticed the positive changes in him. He was more focused and creative, contributing innovative ideas to projects. His boss praised his work, and he received a promotion, further boosting his confidence. Janice supported Patrick in all his endeavors. She attended his work events, cheering him on from the sidelines. Patrick reciprocated by visiting her lectures and participating in her academic events. Their mutual support and understanding strengthened their relationship. As the wedding day approached, Patrick felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. He had transformed his life, finding happiness and stability with Janice. The vineyard was beautifully decorated, with white roses and fairy lights. Friends and family gathered to celebrate their union, witnessing the beginning of a new chapter. The ceremony was simple yet elegant. Patrick and Janice exchanged vows, promising to cherish and support each other. The reception was filled with music, dancing, and heartfelt toasts. Patrick's friends marveled at his journey from turmoil to triumph, celebrating his newfound happiness. Patrick's life had come full circle. With Janice by his side, he felt ready to face the future, confident in the love and stability they had built together. With Andrea still in a coma, Patrick decided it was time to take definitive legal action. One morning, he scheduled a meeting with his lawyer, David, at Miller & Associates, a well-regarded law firm downtown. He arrived early, greeted the receptionist, and sat in the waiting area, flipping through a magazine until David was ready. Patrick outlined his situation during their consultation, detailing Andrea's infidelity and her plans to siphon his money. David took diligent notes, occasionally asking for clarification. They discussed the legal steps necessary to secure a divorce and protect Patrick's assets. David suggested gathering comprehensive evidence to support his case. Over the next few weeks, Patrick collected documents and proof of Andrea's betrayal. He organized bank statements showing unauthorized transfers to accounts he didn't recognize. Patrick also included the private investigator's report, which detailed Andrea's frequent visits to the nightclub and her interactions with her lover. Patrick met David again at the firm, bringing a meticulously prepared folder of evidence. They reviewed each piece, ensuring everything was clear and admissible in court. David drafted the initial divorce papers, incorporating the evidence to substantiate Patrick's claims. They discussed various legal strategies, including protecting Patrick's financial interests and securing a favorable settlement. Patrick also took steps to ensure his finances were secure. He visited his bank, discussing his accounts with the manager, Mr. Thompson. They set up additional security measures and ensured that all his transactions were properly monitored. Patrick moved the majority of his funds into a new account, known only to him and his trusted financial advisor, Carol. In the evenings, Patrick meticulously went through his personal records, double-checking everything for accuracy. He sorted through receipts, correspondences, and any other documentation that might be relevant. He made copies and created a detailed timeline of events, which he shared with David during their regular meetings. Patrick also prepared for the possibility of a contested divorce. He and David discussed potential scenarios, from mediation to court battles. They decided to aim for a swift resolution, but were prepared for prolonged litigation if necessary. David reassured Patrick that his solid evidence and careful preparation would work in his favor. To further protect his interests, Patrick updated his will. He met with his estate planner, Ms. Harris, at a cozy office in a historic building. They reviewed his assets and discussed his wishes. Patrick made sure that his revised will reflected his new circumstances, ensuring that his estate would be handled according to his wishes, regardless of the outcome with Andrea. In addition to financial and legal preparations, Patrick informed key people in his life about the situation. He had candid conversations with his close friends, including Steve, who offered support and practical advice. Patrick also spoke with his employer, explaining the personal challenges he was facing. His boss assured him of the company's support and offered flexible working arrangements if needed. As the weeks passed, Patrick maintained his routine. He continued his workouts at the gym, attended cooking classes, and spent quality time with Janice. Their relationship grew stronger as they navigated these challenging times together. Janice's unwavering support was a constant source of strength for Patrick. One day, David called with an update. The divorce papers had been filed, and they were awaiting a response. Patrick felt a sense of progress, knowing he was taking control of his life. He remained vigilant, ready to address any developments promptly. Patrick's meticulous planning and careful legal preparations positioned him well for the coming challenges. He knew that the road ahead might be tough, but he was determined to see it through. With his legal and financial safeguards in place, Patrick felt confident that he could handle whatever came next, ready to confront Andrea when she eventually woke up from her coma. After 6 long months in a coma, Andrea slowly regained consciousness. Her eyes fluttered open to the sterile white walls of the hospital room. The soft hum of machines and the occasional beep of monitors filled the air. She felt disoriented, her body weak and unfamiliar. As Andrea tried to sit up, a nurse entered the room, her voice gentle yet firm. She explained Andrea's condition and the treatment she had received. Andrea listened quietly, trying to piece together what had happened. The nurse mentioned someone would be in to see her shortly, and Andrea nodded weakly in acknowledgement. Minutes later, Patrick walked into the room, his expression unreadable. He held a folder in his hand, which he placed on the bedside table. Andrea's heart skipped a beat at the sight of him. She had expected relief and warmth, but Patrick's demeanor was cold and distant. Silence hung heavily between them as Patrick pulled up a chair and sat down beside her bed. He opened the folder and began to speak in a measured tone, detailing the events of the past months, her affair, her plans to take his money, and the divorce papers he had filed. Andrea listened in disbelief, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of what she was hearing. Patrick showed her the evidence, bank statements, photos from the private investigator, and records of her late-night rendezvous. Each piece of proof was a dagger to Andrea's heart, confirming Patrick's accusations beyond doubt. She felt exposed and vulnerable, her secrets laid bare for him to see. Andrea tried to speak, to explain herself or deny the allegations, but the words caught in her throat. She searched Patrick's face for a trace of forgiveness or understanding, but all she found was cold resolve. He spoke calmly, without anger or accusation, yet his words cut deep. Throughout the conversation, nurses came in and out, checking Andrea's vitals and adjusting her medication. The hospital routine continued around them, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil within the room. As Patrick finished explaining, he stood up quietly, his gaze still fixed on Andrea. He gathered his things and turned to leave, pausing at the door. Without looking back, he murmured a brief farewell and walked out of the room, leaving Andrea alone with her thoughts. Andrea lay back against the pillows, tears welling in her eyes. She felt a mix of emotions, shock, disbelief, and overwhelming guilt. Her mind raced with unanswered questions and regrets. She was unprepared for the reality of Patrick's reaction, expecting care and forgiveness instead of this cold dismissal. In the days that followed, Andrea processed the events slowly. She spoke with her doctors and nurses, trying to understand her medical condition and the implications of her coma. Yet, her thoughts often returned to Patrick and their shattered relationship. She knew she had hurt him deeply, and the weight of her actions settled heavily on her shoulders. Andrea's awakening marked the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with uncertainty and remorse. She faced a long road ahead, both in terms of her health and her personal life. The hospital became her temporary sanctuary, a place where she grappled with the consequences of her choices and hoped for a chance to make amends. As Andrea lay in her hospital bed, she knew that her life would never be the same. The future was uncertain, and she had much to reckon with in the aftermath of Patrick's revelation. In the quiet of Andrea's hospital room, Patrick returned with a purpose. He carried a slim folder filled with meticulously gathered documents, bank statements, investment records, and legal papers. The hospital room, with its subdued lighting and the faint scent of antiseptic, seemed an unlikely setting for what was about to unfold. Setting the folder on the edge of Andrea's bed, Patrick pulled up a chair and sat down with a composed demeanor. He fixed his gaze on Andrea, who watched him with a mixture of apprehension and resignation. There were no dramatic gestures or raised voices. Patrick's revenge unfolded with a quiet determination. Opening the folder, Patrick began to lay out the evidence piece by piece. He showed Andrea the account statements, highlighting transactions and transfers she had initiated in secret. Each document painted a clear picture of Andrea's attempts to siphon off their shared wealth, preparing for a future without him. As Patrick spoke, he remained calm and factual, sparing no detail. He explained how he had discovered her plans, recounting the meticulous steps he had taken to protect his assets and gather evidence. The room filled with the rustle of paper and the occasional murmur of nurses passing by, unaware of the intense drama unfolding within. Andrea listened in silence, her face a mask of disbelief and realization. She had underestimated Patrick's foresight and determination, believing she could outmaneuver him in her bid for independence. Now, faced with irrefutable proof of her betrayal, Andrea's hopes crumbled like paper in the wind. Patrick's voice remained steady as he revealed the final blow, the documents proving his ownership of the money Andrea had secretly saved. He showed her contracts and legal agreements, signed with her name and sealed with the weight of their shattered trust. Andrea's dreams of financial independence evaporated before her eyes. As Patrick finished his presentation, he closed the folder with a deliberate snap. He stood up, his gaze still fixed on Andrea, who sat silently absorbing the magnitude of what had just transpired. Without another word, Patrick turned and walked towards the door, leaving Andrea alone with her thoughts and the weight of her actions. In the days that followed, Andrea wrestled with the aftermath of Patrick's revelation. She spoke with her lawyer, attempting to salvage what little remained of her dignity and financial security. Yet, the shadow of Patrick's meticulous planning loomed large, casting a pall over her future. The hospital became a temporary refuge and a place of reflection for Andrea. She faced the consequences of her choices with a newfound clarity, grappling with the reality of her shattered marriage and uncertain future. Each passing day brought a fresh wave of regret and remorse, mingled with the determination to rebuild what she had lost. As Andrea lay in her hospital bed, she knew that Patrick's revenge had left an indelible mark on their lives. The path ahead was fraught with challenges and uncertainties, but she was determined to face them head-on. The room, once filled with hope and anticipation, now echoed with the silence of shattered dreams and the harsh reality of betrayal. The day arrived with a weighty anticipation that filled the air in Patrick's modest apartment. Janice, adorned in a stylish yet understated outfit, stood by Patrick's side as they awaited Andrea's arrival. The apartment, adorned with tasteful decorations and framed photographs capturing moments from Patrick's life, felt oddly tense despite its comforting familiarity. Andrea entered cautiously, supported by a nurse who accompanied her from the hospital. Her frail appearance contrasted sharply with Janice's vibrant presence. Patrick greeted Andrea with a nod, his expression unreadable yet tinged with a hint of resolve. Introductions were made in the muted light filtering through the drawn curtains. Janice extended a hand, her smile warm yet tinged with sympathy. Andrea hesitated briefly before accepting the gesture, her hand trembling slightly as they shook hands. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension as they exchanged pleasantries. Andrea struggled to maintain composure, her eyes flickering between Patrick and Janice. The nurse discreetly adjusted Andrea's pillows, sensing the underlying currents in the room. Patrick took charge of the conversation, steering it towards safe topics, the weather, recent news, anything to fill the uncomfortable silence. Janice chimed in occasionally, her voice calm and reassuring, offering Andrea a lifeline amidst the stormy emotions swirling around. As they conversed, Patrick's gaze never wavered from Andrea. He observed her reactions with a detached interest, noting every subtle shift in her demeanor. Andrea, for her part, struggled to process the sight before her, the woman who represented everything she had lost and the life she had destroyed. Time seemed suspended in that small living room, each passing moment laden with unspoken questions and unresolved emotions. Janice's presence loomed large, a silent testament to Patrick's newfound happiness and Andrea's irreversible mistakes. The visit concluded sooner than expected, with Andrea bidding a hasty farewell. Patrick walked her to the door, their exchange brief yet tinged with unspoken regrets. Janice remained composed, her posture graceful amidst the emotional turmoil. As the door closed behind Andrea, Patrick exhaled deeply, his shoulders sagging imperceptibly with relief. Janice placed a comforting hand on his arm, offering silent support as they returned to the quiet of their shared space. In the days that followed, Andrea reflected on the encounter. She struggled to reconcile the image of Janice with her own choices and their consequences. The memory of that final scene haunted her, a stark reminder of Patrick's revenge and the irreversible path she had chosen. Meanwhile, Patrick and Janice resumed their lives together, forging a new path filled with hope and mutual respect. Their relationship blossomed amidst the challenges, strengthened by their shared journey through adversity. In the end, Andrea's introduction to Janice marked a poignant chapter in Patrick's quest for closure and redemption. It was a scene etched in memory, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of forgiveness. Patrick meticulously planned the gathering at his friend's spacious and tastefully decorated apartment, overlooking the city skyline. The evening was set against a backdrop of soft jazz music playing in the background and the warm glow of candlelight casting flickering shadows on the walls. Guests arrived in small groups, their laughter and chatter filling the air with a sense of camaraderie. Andrea entered nervously, accompanied by a close friend who had been caught in the middle of the unfolding drama. Her presence drew curious glances and hushed whispers among the guests, who knew of the recent upheaval in Patrick and Andrea's lives. Patrick greeted each guest with a welcoming smile, his demeanor composed yet betraying an underlying tension. As the evening progressed, Patrick strategically guided conversations towards shared memories and light-hearted anecdotes. Guests mingled effortlessly, their attention subtly drawn to Andrea's presence and the unspoken tension surrounding her. Andrea attempted to maintain a semblance of composure, her smile strained amidst the scrutiny. Patrick's friend, Billy, approached Andrea with a sympathetic smile, engaging her in polite conversation. They spoke of inconsequential matters, the weather, recent movies, anything to diffuse the palpable tension in the room. Andrea's responses were polite yet guarded, her eyes occasionally darting towards Patrick, who watched discreetly from across the room. Midway through the evening, Patrick signaled subtly to Billy, who nodded in understanding. Billy excused himself momentarily, leaving Andrea to navigate the mingling crowd alone. Patrick seized the opportunity, his voice carrying across the room as he addressed the gathered guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patrick began, his tone measured yet commanding attention. "I want to thank you all for joining us tonight." His gaze briefly met Andrea's, who stood frozen amidst the sea of faces turned towards her. "It's a special occasion for me, as I introduce someone who has become very important in my life." A ripple of curiosity swept through the room as Patrick gestured gracefully towards Janice, who stood by his side. Janice's presence exuded warmth and elegance, her smile genuine as she greeted the guests who approached to offer their congratulations. Andrea felt the weight of their collective gaze, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment and regret. Patrick continued with practiced ease, recounting fond memories and shared experiences that highlighted his newfound happiness. His words painted a picture of resilience and renewal, contrasting sharply with Andrea's visible discomfort. The evening became a tableau of contrasts, the warmth of friendship and the chill of exposed secrets. As the gathering drew to a close, Patrick approached Andrea with a quiet resolve. He thanked her for coming, his words tinged with an unspoken finality. Andrea nodded silently, her gaze downcast as she prepared to leave amidst the lingering echoes of Patrick's orchestrated revelation. In the aftermath of that evening, Andrea retreated into solitude, grappling with the aftermath of public humiliation and personal betrayal. The event marked a turning point in her life, a stark reminder of the consequences of her actions and the fragility of trust. Meanwhile, Patrick and Janice embarked on a new chapter together, their bond strengthened by mutual understanding and a shared commitment to moving forward. The evening of public humiliation lingered in memory, a testament to the power of truth and the consequences of deception. It was a chapter etched in the annals of their shared history, shaping the paths they would each tread in the days and years to come. The hospital corridor echoed with the soft shuffle of footsteps as Patrick and Janice walked side by side, leaving behind the sterile environment that had witnessed Andrea's turmoil. They emerged into the crisp evening air, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Janice linked her arm with Patrick's, a gesture of quiet solidarity as they navigated the bustling streets. They passed by quaint cafes and shops adorned with colorful displays, the city alive with the hum of evening activities. Patrick glanced at Janice with a faint smile, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had embarked upon together. Janice returned his gaze with a reassuring squeeze of his arm, her presence a comforting presence amidst the uncertainties that lay ahead. Meanwhile, Andrea remained in the hospital room, the silence broken only by the steady beep of monitoring equipment. She stared at the empty chair where Patrick had sat moments ago, grappling with the stark reality of her solitude. As Patrick and Janice settled into Patrick's car, the engine purred to life with a reassuring hum. They drove through familiar streets lined with stately homes and leafy trees, each turn marking a departure from the past and a step towards their shared future. Andrea's thoughts drifted to the life she had once known, the comfortable routines, the shared dreams now shattered by her own choices. She reached for her phone, scrolling through messages that once held promises of love and commitment, now echoes of betrayal and loss. Patrick parked the car outside his apartment building, a modest yet welcoming sanctuary that had witnessed both heartache and healing. Janice stepped out first, her eyes scanning the familiar surroundings with a mixture of anticipation and gratitude. Andrea's gaze lingered on a family photograph on the bedside table, capturing a moment of laughter and warmth that now felt like a distant memory. She closed her eyes briefly, a wave of regret washing over her as she confronted the consequences of her actions. Inside the apartment, Patrick and Janice settled into a rhythm of domesticity, unpacking groceries, preparing a simple meal together. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, punctuated by shared laughter and quiet moments of contentment. Andrea's nurse entered the room, breaking her reverie with a gentle smile. She checked Andrea's vitals, offering words of encouragement that rang hollow amidst the weight of Andrea's solitude. The nurse adjusted the blankets, a silent gesture of compassion in the face of Andrea's isolation. Patrick and Janice sat on the balcony, savoring the cool evening breeze that carried the promise of a fresh start. They watched as lights flickered on in neighboring apartments, each window a glimpse into lives intertwined with their own. Andrea's eyes drifted to the window, where the city skyline glittered with distant possibilities. She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek as she confronted the harsh reality of her final departure, alone, facing the consequences of her choices with no one to lean on. Outside, the night embraced Patrick and Janice in its quiet embrace, a testament to the resilience of love and the courage to begin anew. They leaned into each other's warmth, their hearts beating in sync with the rhythm of hope and possibility. Inside the hospital room, Andrea took a deep breath, steeling herself for the uncertain future that lay ahead. The room fell silent once more, a solitary witness to Andrea's final departure, alone, facing the consequences of her actions with no one left to turn to.